What if the food you trusted most wasn't the strongest? What if milk wasn't the richest source of calcium? And oranges weren't the king of vitamin C? Because hidden in plain sight, there was a leaf that outshined them both. A leaf so powerful it could have changed the way we eat, yet the world called it a weed. Welcome to Forgotten Leaf Secrets. Tonight, we uncover the suppressed story of nature's most resilient superleaf, the plant that carried strength in its veins, healed generations in silence, and still grows in the shadows of history. Long before supermarkets and laboratories, survival depended on what the land could give. And when grains failed, when droughts struck, when armies marched through villages leaving famine behind, this leaf appeared. It grew in poor soil, demanded no irrigation, and refused to die. Where wheat collapsed, it thrived. Where rice withered, it spread. It was the silent answer to hunger. Empires recognized its power. Conquerors carried its seeds across borders, planting it in new lands to secure their armies. Villages harvested it in baskets, drying it for winter, boiling it into soups, grinding it into powders. Children chewed it raw in fields. Elders brewed it into teas. Healers crushed it into remedies. It was not luxury food. It was survival food. Legends whispered that soldiers marched longer when fed this leaf, that mothers gave it to children to strengthen their bones, that famine never fully conquered a village where this plant grew. It was the difference between collapse and endurance. And yet, it was not celebrated with monuments or songs. It was humble, ordinary, growing in silence. But beneath its simplicity was a truth. This leaf carried civilizations through centuries. It was the unspoken backbone of survival. To ancient healers, this leaf was never ordinary. It was sacred, was woven into the rhythm of life, stitched into rituals, and whispered into myths. In villages, mothers brewed it into teas for strength. They believed it carried the power to protect children from sickness, to build bones stronger than milk, and to keep fevers from returning. Warriors chewed it before battle. They claimed it gave stamina, sharpened focus, and courage that lasted through the night. Some legends even said the leaf carried the spirit of ancestors, guiding soldiers when fear threatened to break them. Priests placed it on altars. Garlands of the leaf were offered to gods of fertility and harvest. It was burned in sacred fires to cleanse homes, and scattered on graves to promise rebirth. Travelers wrote of villages where this leaf was treated as more than food. It was medicine, it was symbol, it was myth. A plant that connected the living to the divine and reminded them that survival was not just physical, it was spiritual. But myths can be dangerous, because when a leaf becomes sacred, it cannot be owned. And when it cannot be owned, it threatens those who seek control. Centuries after myths and rituals, modern science finally turned its gaze toward this forgotten leaf. Researchers collected samples from villages, tested them in sterile labs, and compared them against the foods we trust most. The results were staggering. Calcium levels that surpassed milk, the very drink we were taught to depend on for strong bones. Vitamin C levels that outshined oranges, the fruit crowned as the king of immunity. Protein content that rivaled beans, antioxidants that shielded cells, and minerals that strengthened blood. It was not folklore, it was measurable fact. Every test confirmed what generations had whispered. This leaf was a powerhouse of nutrition. Scientists wrote of its resilience. Unlike delicate crops, it thrived in poor soil, survived droughts, and resisted pests without chemicals. It was nature's design for survival, a plant that carried abundance without asking for industry's help. But with every discovery came a question. If this leaf was stronger than milk, richer than oranges, and more resilient than beans, why was it erased from textbooks? Why was it hidden from markets? Why was it silenced? The answer was not in the soil, but in the systems that feared it. Its flavor was never meant for luxury. It was earthy, bitter, sharp, a taste that carried the soil itself. Children chewed it raw in the fields, their faces twisting at the bitterness. Yet mothers insisted, this is strength, this is survival. Soldiers swore it gave stamina. They spoke of marching longer, fighting harder, and healing faster. Travelers wrote of villages untouched by famine, where this leaf was boiled into soups, mixed into bread, and dried into powders that lasted through harsh winters. Healers testified to its power. They crushed it into poultices for wounds, brewed it into teas for fevers, and prescribed it for bones that refused to mend. They believed it carried resilience, not just for the body, but for the spirit. And yet, despite its bitterness, people returned to it again and again, because in times of scarcity, taste did not matter. What mattered was survival, and survival was written in the veins of this leaf. But survival alone was not enough, because as its reputation grew, so did resistance. The more people relied on it, the more powerful it became, and the more dangerous it seemed to those who sought control. But then came silence. When colonial powers arrived, they did not see a miracle plant. They saw disorder. They saw a leaf that grew freely, without permission, without profit. In their records, it was dismissed as primitive food. In their textbooks, it was erased as unworthy of study. Markets labeled it worthless. And slowly, the leaf that had carried civilizations was pushed into the shadows. Why? Because it refused to obey. It did not need fertilizer. It did not need industry. It did not bend to control. And freedom in the soil was dangerous to those who sought power. Colonial administrators promoted imported crops instead: wheat, rice, sugarcane plants that demanded labor, irrigation, and dependence. They built systems where survival was no longer free, but purchased. And in that system, this leaf was a threat. So it was branded a nuisance, weed, a plant unworthy of empire. And with every passing decade, its name faded from records, its story buried beneath the weight of colonial silence. Yet in forgotten corners, families still whispered its name. They still harvested it quietly, brewed it in secret, and passed its memory from one generation to the next. Because no empire, no industry, no textbook could erase what the soil remembered. As the world shifted from colonial fields to industrial farms, the silence around this leaf deepened. Factories demanded uniformity, markets demanded control, and industries demanded profit. But this leaf refused. It grew untamed, irregular, unpredictable. It did not bend to fertilizers. It did not require pesticides. And it did not wait for permission. It was nature's rebellion against the system. Industrial farming thrived on dependence. Seeds that had to be purchased, crops that demanded chemicals, harvests that locked farmers into cycles of debt. This leaf broke that cycle. It grew freely, abundantly, without cost. And in a world built on profit, freedom was dangerous. So the narrative was rewritten. Pamphlets called it worthless. Agricultural boards labeled it unmarketable. Textbooks erased its nutritional power. And slowly, the plant that had carried civilizations was buried under the weight of industry's propaganda. Yet whispers remained. Farmers spoke of its resilience. Villagers remembered its strength. And healers still brewed it in secret, defying the silence. Because no matter how loudly industry shouted, the soil still remembered, and the soil refused to forget. Yet despite the silence, despite the erasure, this leaf never truly vanished. It survived in shadows, carried quietly by those who refused to forget. In remote villages, families still harvested it at dawn, hiding baskets from the eyes of officials. Mothers brewed it into teas for their children, whispering that it was the strength of our ancestors. Healers dried its leaves in secret, grinding them into powders that cured fevers and healed wounds. Travelers spoke of communities untouched by famine, where this plant was still part of daily life, a quiet rebellion against the narrative of industry. It became a symbol of resistance, not celebrated in markets, not praised in textbooks, but remembered in kitchens and rituals. Every sip of its bitter tea was an act of defiance. Every harvest was a reminder that survival did not belong to corporations, but to the soil itself. Generations passed, and still the leaf endured. It grew along forgotten paths, sprouted in abandoned fields, and clung to the cracks of neglected lands. It refused extinction, because no empire, no industry, no textbook could erase what nature had written into its veins. And now, as whispers grow louder, the question returns. If this leaf survived in silence for centuries, what happens when the world finally remembers? Imagine if this leaf returned today. A plant richer in calcium than milk, stronger in vitamin C than oranges, thriving where modern crops collapse. What would it mean for us? For children growing up in cities where nutrition is sold in bottles? For families trapped in cycles of expensive supplements and fortified foods? For nations struggling with hunger, drought, and failing harvests? This leaf could change everything. It could rebuild bones, strengthen immunity, and feed millions without chemicals, without industry, without control. It could grow in silence, in cracks of forgotten lands, and still carry abundance. But here's the question. Would industries allow it? Would corporations embrace a plant that grows freely, abundantly, without profit? Or would they silence it again, branding it worthless, erasing it from textbooks, burying it under propaganda? And if they silence this leaf, what else have they silenced? What other plants, remedies, and secrets lie hidden in the shadows of history? What else has been erased from our memory because it was too powerful to be controlled? The leaf that carried more calcium than milk, more vitamin C than oranges, and resilience beyond history was dismissed as a weed. But weeds are only plants that refuse to obey. They grow where they are not wanted. They survive where others collapse. Sometimes they hold the secrets that could change the world. This leaf was silenced by empires, erased by industry, and forgotten by textbooks. Yet it survived in shadows, waiting for us to remember. Waiting for us to ask, what else has been hidden? What other plants, remedies, and truths lie buried beneath the soil of history? The answers are out there in forgotten fields, in whispered traditions, in secrets nature still holds. And here we will uncover them together. Like and subscribe to Forgotten Leaf Secrets, because the next plant they erased may hold the key to our future.